All right, looks like we're good to go. So welcome back, everyone. We've a bit of a mammoth morning this morning with the Residents' Opinion Survey. I'm now going to hand it over to Tanya and her team to walk us through the community contracts, and we've got some visitors here. I just want to apologise for the delay for those that have been waiting. We shall do that when they're there. So just apologies for you folk for having to stick around for so long this morning. If I'd known the agenda, I would have rejigged it so that you were up first, but I'll deal with that offline. So just handing it over to Tanya. Good morning.
Morena. So this morning you'll hear back from, well, there's actually 3 report backs from our work with the community contracts. So these community contracts actually sit inside social investment but are a little bit separate. And just to cover off very quickly, about I think two and a half years ago it was decided that a portion of the social investment fund would just be carved off to support emergency services and surf lifesaving. So this is just a continuation from that work, and every year these contracts are required to report back to Council. So you'll hear from Charly and the Lifeflight Trust team today, and apologies from Wellington Free Ambulance, but their reports are also here, and I might just quickly run through that. So just to probably speed things up, a team's been waiting and probably keen to head back to Wellington. I'd just like to introduce Lyndall and Sebastian from Lifeflight Trust, and I'm just going to hand it over to you guys to report back. Thank you.
Good morning, team. I'm not too sure whether staff have told you. Just push the little button on the controller there. The light will go red. And
I think we're ready to go. Morning, everybody. Your Worship, Chair, Councillors and team. We really appreciate the opportunity to be here, to get to know some friends of Lifeflight, to report back on what your generosity has made possible, and to obviously say a big thank you, and to take any questions. If you have questions throughout, please just feel free to shoot. We also will take an opportunity to answer any of your questions at the end as well. So I think we just get into it. I'm Seb, the Head of Fundraising at the Rescue Base, and this is my colleague Lyndall.
Hi, I'm the Direct Marketing Manager in the fundraising team.
And also does an amazing job with all of our grant funding, which is essential. So I'm just going to use the little clicker here. Great. So as you know, one of the services that your funding makes possible for this region is your local Westpac rescue helicopter. It's a fantastic life-saving machine, and essentially it's an absolute last resort when every minute counts. It's landing on someone's backyard when there's an anaphylactic shock going on in the home. It's responding to road accidents, and it's doing the things that you see in the paper where we're winching people out of the bush, off a sinking ship, finding lost divers and returning them home to their families. Obviously all of that's been turbocharged during this little thing called COVID, and while we haven't had the rescue type of activity going on, we've still had sick babies being born needing to get to Wellington Hospital. We've still had cardiac arrests going on which we've needed to respond in people's homes, and I'll hand over to Lyndall shortly. And we've also had to fly people all around the country in our air ambulance planes. So I'm not sure if everybody knows that the air ambulance service is something else that your funding supports, which is provided by aeroplanes, flying people all around New Zealand to get to the care that they desperately need. One of the things that not everybody realises is that while we have an amazing health system here in New Zealand, a lot of it is very centralised. So there's a lot of people that only exist in one place. And I'll give you an example. I was just talking to a lovely lady last week. She had had her baby in the Wellington region, beautiful young girl, had been born missing vital organs, also had no throat, and her heart was reversed on the wrong place. You know, you wouldn't wish it on anybody. No one knew it was going to happen like that. They just discovered it at birth. And it turned out there was only one person in the country that could put this lovely girl back together again. We kicked into gear. That person was based in Auckland. You can't drive them there on a 9-hour road trip. You can't even fly them there in a bumpy, unpressurised helicopter. You've got to have a plane. So we raced her to Auckland, had all the road ambulances teed up, drove her with lights and sirens directly into surgery where there was a team of 6 waiting for her. They had about 18 minutes left of her life before they got her into surgery. She's now a gorgeous 3-year-old girl, and she's 100%, she's living a happy life. So that's the kind of stuff that doesn't necessarily make it to the papers, but that's what you're supporting with our air ambulance plane service, ensuring that we can get your lovely local residents not just to Wellington Hospital, but also to Middlemore in Auckland, to Starship, to the Burwood Spinal Unit in Christchurch. Now I'll hand over to Lyndall to talk a little bit more about COVID. Thank you.
Thanks, Eb. So it's been an intense few months for the Lifeflight team. Support from wonderful supporters like yourselves have ensured that our emergency teams have continued flying 24/7 throughout the pandemic so far. During level 4 lockdown, 160 people were helped by Lifeflight, including 27 premature babies flown to emergency care. Due to the challenge of operating during COVID, each call-out required an increase in effort, time and cost. So the team had to quickly adapt to the way we work to continue keeping everybody safe and to save lives. With your help, the following measures were put into place. We trained additional staff, including our CE, to provide added safety and care when flying patients who were potentially infected with COVID-19. Additional vital medical and cleaning supplies were purchased. We ensured that only rostered crews were on base, so every time there was a handover, there was no contact between those crews. Just in case somebody did contract COVID, then the other crews could continue flying. We had to quickly source some laptops so that the support team could work from home, which we did right throughout level 4.
I got my first laptop after 10 years of working for Lifeflight, so it felt quite special.
We all did, it was pretty flash. So you just see from some of the pictures up there, our pilots had to adapt to flying in full PPE gear with masks and things. If we had any mission where a patient was potentially infected with COVID, every single surface had to be cleaned down on the plane. All PPE gear had to be disposed of properly. So it did add a whole lot of extra time and things to each mission. Cool.
Now, one of the things we were asked to report on today was some specifics about the types of situations in which your funding helps people. So this is a breakdown of, percentage-wise, the types of situations in which your funding has helped people in need on the Kapiti coast. So these are all residents of Kapiti. You'll see on the left-hand side, almost half are emergency air ambulance responses to medical incidents. So what that is, it's a type of situation where a road ambulance may have gone to that sort of emergency, but this was too urgent or too hard to get to, so that's where our Westpac rescue helicopter has kicked into gear, and it's landed literally in someone's backyard or on a road intersection, outside their house with the assistance of your lovely local police force or fire service who blocked the roads off for us, or they've landed on a local beach. So those will be medical incidents like heart attacks, poisonings, things like that. 13% were babies and children needing specialist care, so that's people like that lovely girl Destiny who I just talked about, and a lovely Avatar who we'll tell you about shortly. It's a lot of premature babies, people that just literally they won't get to take their first breath unless they get to neonatal intensive care. 20% were adults requiring urgent air ambulance transfers to specialist care. That could be flying someone down to Burwood. That could be flying someone up to Middlemore, for example, for a surgery, that type of thing. And then 18% were accidents, responses, search and rescue. That's the stuff that makes it to the news. Most of it isn't quite considered newsworthy, unfortunately, due to the pressures of modern journalism, but all of it's equally life-saving and super important to the whānau and the communities, I'm sure you know. So I'll just hand back to Lyndall.
So why your support is needed. Each time a patient is helped by Lifeflight, the shortfall required for each mission is around $2,600. And this is why we fundraise to come up with those costs. We also obviously have aircraft maintenance, both scheduled and unscheduled. Crew and patient safety is obviously absolutely paramount to us. Training is a big part too, training our crew. For example, every 3 months, if one of our paramedics or crew haven't been involved in a winch rescue, they're required to undergo training to ensure that they remain current. Fuel is another big cost. For an example, to fly from our base to Paraparam, the Westpac rescue chopper takes 13.5 minutes and costs $94 in fuel. and the
So if
Kapiti.
anyone's going to have a sudden medical incident, we need you to hang on for at least 13 and a half minutes like we've seen here.
There's also other bits and pieces that the crew require. As I've said, safety is paramount, and their equipment needs to remain current and in good condition. So they have vests that they wear, their flight helmets, and their flying suits that they wear, fire retardant, and so forth. The shortfall for Kapiti that we forecast for this year is just over $114,000.
So very briefly, you'll see the response times in these circles on our map. That gives you an idea of how quickly we can get here. We fly at about 240 kilometres an hour in the Westpac chopper full bore. So most of the Kapiti Coast area is reachable to us within minutes when needed. And you've got the little fuel costs on the side there. Lyndall, do you want to share Avatage? Because this is a gorgeous story.
This is a pretty cool little story. So I'll just finish off with this patient story. As you can see, this is Avatage, and he's also featured in our latest supporters newsletter. Avatage was born just over a year ago at Wellington Hospital. Initially, all seemed absolutely fine, but very soon after his birth, it became apparent that things were not good. The right side of this little baby's heart was growing bigger than the left because blood was being pumped straight back into the heart through the liver. So basically, he had high output cardiac failure. The only option was to airlift him to Starship Hospital, where the neonatal cardiac team is located. So Dad and baby were taken to the Lifeflight base at midnight and flown to Auckland. Avatage's parents were told there was a possibility that their baby may not survive, so that flight was pretty heart-wrenching for the dad. They did make it to Starship Hospital, where he was taken straight in for life-saving surgery. 3 surgeries later, and his family have returned to their home in Kapiti, and he's just turned 1 back in July and is a happy, healthy little boy, as you can see from the photo.
And thank you all for making that possible. We really, really do appreciate the support. And we're grateful to be here. Happy to take any questions at all.
Oh, I just need to clear my throat first. Lyndall and Sebastian, thank you very much. That look, I almost said at the start, you can finish right there after the first story. It was compelling enough, and I mean that in all seriousness. It's just amazing the work that you guys do and the service that you provide. So, Councillor, I see Councillor Randall's up first, and any other elected members from there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm ready. Yeah, well done. Very good presentation. And I'm a ward councillor for Paraparaumu, and my colleague, Councillor Holiday. And we've been pushing, as you know, there's a question around the future of the airport in Kapiti. And we've been pushing for a long time now to, save this airport. Could you explain that briefly? That if the airport was lost, will this affect your air ambulance service?
This one? Good question, thank you. And I just want to acknowledge the efforts from yourselves and from your worship to putting your voice behind this. We were happy to chime in to the recent press articles, and we fielded a number of calls over the weekend to answer that question, which is that we are affected. And some very, very good colleagues of ours, Dr. Alex and Karen from the intensive care unit at Wellington Hospital, they wrote a letter which I believe was well received and shared, and we certainly agree with their views, which is that it is critical for the sustainability of emergency services in the region. For Lifeflight, what this airport does is a number of things, one of which is that if there's bad weather in Wellington and we're flying sick people into Wellington that need to get to Wellington Hospital, we can land here, and that is brilliant for us. A number of our aircraft can do so. And that might be that Wellington Airport's closed due to bad weather, or as it recently has been having some work on the seawall where it was closed at night. We were running air ambulance plane operations from here at night, so we'd bring a road ambulance up, operate from here and drive them via road. And some of that was reported in that recent press coverage. That would have been that. The other thing it does is we often use it as a landing site for our Westpac chopper. It's a fantastic place for us to come in and land because it has all of the various aviation requirements and coordinates that make it an easy and quick place to land. So when time allows, where we don't have to land the chopper in an improvised landing space, we meet a local road ambulance here with a patient in the back. We land on the airfield do the patient transfer there, and fly them back in our Westpac rescue helicopter. So it has a number of uses for us, what we will call in our resilience side of our operation, plus in some of our day-to-day activity as well. So we feel for you. It's a huge resource for your community as well. It's also important for us. So good on you for giving it your best shot. Have I answered that?
Thanks very much, Sebastian, and good question, Bernie. Appreciate you asking it. Councillor Holiday.
Yes, thank you so much. I don't think there was a dry eye in the room today. Thank you for all the work that you do. I was actually going to ask a similar question to Councillor Randalls, but I'll just follow on a little bit. One of the issues with the airport is that the aviation safety system is being removed, and that's happening elsewhere in the country at regional airports. Could you comment briefly about how that impacts on your operation, not only at this airport, but also at those other airports where that's happening at the moment?
It's a good question, thank you. And I may need to follow up with you on that because I'm not an expert in that, but I know it has been a major for the whole aviation sector, including emergency air services, where there is a change to how the guidance systems are used to safely and efficiently get aircraft from A to B. And the regional airports are part of that for, let's say, emergency landing scenarios where, if you can't make it to the airport that you're going to, what is the next airport that you land at, for example. So the regional airports are all part of that network. But I would have to follow up just with my colleague who's our Chief Pilot, Harry, just to get you a proper answer. May I email you later today? Is that okay? Thank you.
Yeah, that would be much appreciated. Thank you. I'm sure we'd all appreciate some of that information because it all ties into the case that we're making to save our airport at the moment. So my other question was, you obviously had a lot of expenses that were incurred during the COVID crisis. Was there any extra funding that was available to you through, say, government channels to cover any of that, or did you have to dig into your coffers to cover that crisis?
You got one great grant, Lyndall. Did you want to just cover that briefly, and I'll talk about the digging in?
Yeah, there were a couple of grants that came up where we could. There are a couple of grants that did become available. One was through MSD, where we could put our case forward for the extra costs that we had incurred, and there were quite a few extra costs. So we managed to get a little bit of money from that grant, not a lot, but definitely it was helpful. Yeah.
Right. And the vast majority has been huge losses, to be totally honest. So we cancelled hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of fundraising events that were due to take place during this period. We've just postponed another 2 this week, and that's a huge source of our fundraising income. We would have had a fantastic street appeal across the whole region, where we have lots of wonderful volunteers who come from this region too, and dig in. All of that activity was cancelled, and a number of our corporate partners haven't been able to support. So we've taken losses. We've been trying to make up that money where possible through alternate methods of fundraising, but we've been digging into our reserves primarily to get by. Thank you. And all of them have been digging deep with whatever they can. We just are getting inundated with people sending us the money they would have spent going for a coffee that week, or what they've saved on petrol during lockdown, all coming with really cute, wonderful notes and things like that. We open the mail together every morning. So we have had, on the flip side, we have had the best support I've ever seen in 12 years worth of fundraising for Lifeflight, albeit it's coming in very small $25, $30 amounts at the moment.
Thanks for coming in today. It's always quite heartwarming to hear the different stories and how our support has helped our community. So thanks for coming in. Many of my questions have been answered, particularly around the airport situation, and I was aware that you had been using it over a period of time, particularly in the evenings or over that nighttime period. So obviously for our community, it's a significant part of our infrastructure that's will be needed in the future, that's for sure. I just want to touch on the $114,000 shortfall that you've mentioned. Is that taking into consideration perhaps your normal amount of fundraising that you would get from the community? Because I know that there's, dare I say, a lot of older, wealthier people in our community that are avid supporters of the Lifeflight Trust. So does that 114,000 take into consideration what would be normal for your donations, if you know what I mean?
So that's our overall shortfall that we're forecasting for this region that we need to fundraise for, based on some rough averages of what we perceive will be the community need for the next 12 months. And those lovely people will contribute towards that.
On from that, in terms of your COVID response, I completely understand how debilitating and so forth it's been for you. But I guess on the flip side, we've seen less road accidents and mountaineering accidents and all those kind of things. So there's a little bit of a make-up there, I guess.
But as you would have seen in the pie chart, that might have made up, let's say, 18% of the support that we provide this region. The rest of it, the premature births, the heart attacks, those medical incidents, the things that happen in the home, even a lot of the workplace accidents still taking place, but certainly somewhat less of the rescue side, absolutely, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Pravanov.
Thank you, Lyndall and Steve, for coming along. Very, very compelling presentation today, and thank you very much for all the really grand work that you're all doing. So I have a follow-up question to Councillor Randall's, and that's in relation to the airport. If it actually did close, what actually will that mean? You know, are there alternatives here that you can use, or basically it's all going to be by, well, I suppose helicopters, I know there's one in Waikanai, but when it comes to the planes, what can you do if it closes?
So the predominant air ambulance plane activity that we provide, we already use via Wellington Airport. It would mean that we haven't got a backup when we can't use Wellington Airport, and our backup would become Palmerston North or Masterton. In a number of cases, Masterton wouldn't be usable to us because of the windy road and the altitude. And in those situations, Palmerston North would become our backup. Some of that just would become unviable. And I guess at a certain, some people have, like Destiny, 18 minutes left to live. Once you add an hour plus onto that road journey, you just may not be having that punch, right? So, yeah, look, it's serious. Have I answered that?
And also, how many, just as a ballpark figure, how many people would actually be in that really critical situation that if they couldn't fly out of here, would actually not live?
That specifically, I'm sorry, but I can certainly try to find that out. I just don't know that, I'm sorry. We get a call out roughly every 6 hours, 24/7. The vast majority of those people are in Wellington, Porirua, Hutt Valley, Kapiti Coast, Wairarapa. I couldn't tell you exactly how many will be impacted, I'm sorry, but I can do my best to find out.
Echoing everyone else's sentiments here, thank you very much for the services you provide. Again, just building on what Councillor Randall and Pravanov were saying as well. In regards to landing at the airport here, taking aside as an emergency spot, even as an emergency spot, how often does it get used as an alternative? And the second question was regards to fixed wing versus chopper usage, if you like. How much fixed wing use do you use it for?
We predominantly use it currently for the Westpac chopper as an excellent landing site for those transfers where time allows, where a road ambulance can bring the patient to the airport. That's our predominant use of it as far as actually landing there. It's on every flight a backup option for us, and that backup option could be required due to any number of factors during that flight, whether that be you needing to land early for any number of reasons, or you not being able to land at your chosen destination at Wellington Airport. So it becomes a backup on every flight. The portion you mentioned of how many chopper flights versus how many plane flights, overall for our service, we'd fly about 1 helicopter mission every day, and we'd save about 3 lives via our planes every day. So that gives us a sort of an approximate split as to how many people overall we fly in each aircraft. So the majority of people that we're flying are via plane, and the majority of those people are from Wellington Airport. Have I answered that?
The airport. I appreciate that it's a backup, but how much actual usage does it get as a fixed wing? Because even it does get closed down, potentially a helicopter service could be potentially retained, say for argument's sake. I was just curious to know, other than it being a diversion to Palmerston North, how much that would impact. I mean, of course it would impact, but just how much does it currently get used as a fixed craft landing spot?
Wellington Airport's not available. Would we bring a fixed wing aircraft into Kapiti Coast Airport?
Other question I had, sorry. Is there a conversation going on with central government with regards to full funding of the Lifeflight Trust? I'm sure that's an ongoing goal, but just wondering how active or how live that discussion is.
I'm on the mic.
Yeah.
There is. And we actively have been lobbying for 40 years of Lifeflight's existence for that. And that certainly is a goal, to increase the funding to the maximum possible that we can from central government. There was a major tender round several years ago, which was run by the Ministry of Health and ACC, and we lobbied as actively as we could in the lead up to that, particularly via our chairperson at the time, who was Annette King, who was a fantastic advocate for us in those circles in that process. We got it to the maximum level that we could as sort of one voice of many in this sector. We anticipate that there's future tender rounds coming up, or we've been advised from the Ministry of Health that there are future tender rounds coming up. Pricing will be part of that, and we'll be lobbying as hard as we can in the lead up to that, but that hasn't kicked off yet. They come up periodically, and we can only dispute it at that time.
Look, thank you, Sebastian and Lyndall. I appreciate your needing to get back into Wellington. So thanks for taking the time to come up today. And if you could pass on our thanks to the team at Lifeflight Trust on behalf of the Kapiti Coast District Council, that would be fantastic. So
we certainly will, and we extend our sincere thanks. We're really honoured to be part of this community. A number of our staff live up here and commute in for work. We love the opportunity to be here today to thank you for your gifts. All the best.
Thanks, guys. Tanya, if I just hand it back over to you, we've got Charly coming up next.
Just to introduce Charly. Charly is from Surf Life Saving New Zealand. He's going to do a report back as well. I forgot to mention I do have handouts here, so we'll quickly hand those out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tanya, and thank you very much for this opportunity. Good morning, everybody. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about what we do, but more importantly I wanted to talk about the benefit that it has to the ratepayers of Kapiti Coast, because I think that's important. The paid lifeguard service, which I'm going to talk about today, will begin this year on the 21st of December, and that's, as a rough rule of thumb, that's what happens every year. It starts roughly when school finishes, and we do 30 days of on the beach service right through and towards the end of January. We put 3 guards on the beach over a 7-hour period during those days, and the 2 locations at both Paikoka and Otaki have that service running out of their club. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is that in addition to that paid service, which we're obviously supported by yourselves for, the volunteer service takes place on a Saturday and a Sunday. So we have volunteers come in to cover those weekends, which start roughly around the early November, and they go right through until approximately Easter. So to summarise, for every hour that the council or the ratepayers of Kapiti are paying for on the beach, you receive an additional 2 hours of volunteer time. So you get what I call a 2-for-1 special, whichever way you look at it is extremely good value for money. The other thing I wanted to talk about was wherever possible we're employing guards from those local clubs at both Paikoka and Otaki. So we're trying as best we can to be able to employ local youth here from the Kapiti Coast, and generally they are members of those clubs. I will reserve the right to put the best possible people on the beach for the summer period in order that we're delivering the best quality product, but wherever possible we have local people who are actually being employed. Thank you for the additional funds that we're receiving this year. Thank you to Tanya and to Kara for their support. Always easy to deal with. That additional funding will mean that we can put some additional resource on the coast, and it will probably take the form of a guard who will float in a supervisory capacity. My gut feel is that it's going to be a very busy summer. I think there's a lot of New Zealanders out there with some spare leave who've been sitting at home during the winter in difficult circumstances, and people are going to be out and around. My team are already gearing up towards what will be a challenging time. But any additional resource in terms of lifeguards that we can put on the beach will be good, as the need actually requires. Last year, a major focus for us was preventative actions, and by that we mean that our guards are proactively looking for opportunities to warn people about the dangers of the marine environment which they're attempting to be entertained in. It's a slight funny one, I know it sounds crazy, but if we actually have to do a rescue, we sort of feel like we've failed almost. Our real role going forward will be in education. It will be in educating New Zealanders on things like RIPS and swim between the flags and SunSmart. And as the population in New Zealand changes in terms of demographic and in terms of culturally, we are increasingly seeing groups of people where mum and dad might have never been to the beach, or mum and dad can't swim. And for that reason, we continue to promote our beach education program, which we do in schools as well. And that's a full day at the beach, and Otaki and Paikok are also involved in that. They'll come out with a supervised training session for the whole day with a group of school kids, and we teach them about some of those key messages in order to keep them safe on the beach. Thank you for your support. I wanted to throw things open quite quickly for questions if I could. It will be a busy summer as we have. We are pleasantly surprised by the level of enthusiasm for and applications for the jobs that we've got going this summer. I think it's up about 25 to 30% on last year, and I truly believe it's because there will be limited opportunities in the hospitality sector for some of our students. But it also means that it's going to be competitive to get a job with us up here on the Kapiti Coast this summer, which is a good thing. The quality of what we'll be delivering will continue to be high. Has anybody got any questions?
Thanks, Charlie. So I've got Councillor Buswell.
Thank you. I understand that both Otaki and Paikakariki have well-established surf life-saving clubs and so forth. Do you see the need anywhere else on our coastline? Just with population growth and so forth. I mean, Paraparaumu Beach would spring to mind in terms of a busy beach, or is it more to do with safety and the water currents and so forth?
I don't think there's any doubt that there's going to be increased demand for what we do going forward. It's probably fair to say that as soon as we put a service at a particular location, it tends to be a self-perpetuating exercise, so we'll get more people coming to the beach. But we've recently beefed out, employed an additional resource a gentleman who's brighter than me, does things called aquatic risk analysis. So we'll tend to go into an area and go, look, how many people are there, what are the conditions, what's the best way to get the best bang for our buck in terms of a service. And that might mean signage, or it might mean education, or it might mean a full service. That process is a reasonably lengthy one and a reasonably expensive one, but I think as we do see increasing numbers coming to the beach, that we are going to have to start to think a little bit creatively about exactly where the service is provided, and that might mean all sorts of things, drones and that kind of thing to ascertain where the need is. The traditional patrolling area between the flags could well be quite different as we go forward. But we would prefer to do a proper analysis first on the actual conditions prior to saying, let's just throw resource at this and let's put a service in. So I hope that in a roundabout way has answered your question.
Yes, it's really great, and nice to hear that you're thinking so far forward about how the services can change, because I guess it's pretty archaic or historic kind of way of operating. So that's really great to hear that you're thinking forward. Thanks.
Councillor Holiday.
Hi, look again, thank you for all the services you provide. Look, the question I had is just noted in our agenda that governments are putting forward 9.4 million in perpetuality going forward. And not taking anything away from the fact that I fully support the funding that we give Lifesaving New Zealand, and long may it continue. How is that going to impact on you guys? I mean, doing the math, it's about 130,000 on average per group around the country. Allocation-wise, I wouldn't have thought there'd be too much of a difference in the sizings of that, because the surf life clubs tend to be a certain size rather than a certain demographic as such.
Just to summarise, out of the $9.4 million, $5 million is being directly allocated to clubs for operational expenditure. And by that we mean just keeping the doors open, the toilet paper, the cleaning, and anything directly associated with providing a lifeguard service, tubes, IRBs, ATVs, all that sort of thing. I'm on the project team for All My Sins, which is attempting to provide a model to allocate that funding across the 75 clubs nationwide, and that'll depend very much on what that operational expenditure is. We have clubs like Papamoa and places that have enormous clubs and 2 or 3 patrol locations. I should stress here that that sounds like a lot of money. We estimate that it costs about $12 million operationally to run those clubs, so it represents about 45% of the potential cost of running them. What we're hoping, a further $2.5 million will be allocated for capital expenditure, and that is clubs that need new roof or replacement of it, and that's not going to go terribly far across 75 of us. Pycock obviously has been in the news recently, and a further 1.7 is allocated for the national body for overhead and other bits and pieces as well. So yes, it will have obviously a very positive impact, because clubs won't be so reliant on Class 4 Gaming Trust money to survive, and we would obviously much prefer them to be able to focus on providing lifeguard services and training guards rather than fundraising. There will still be a small reliance on sponsorship and external funding options, but that will tend to be used for some of the larger ticket items and to support our sports program, which acts as a feeder for lifeguarding. So it'll free up people's time. They're not going to be shaking buckets and other bits and pieces as much, but it will still require additional support from some valued sponsors going forward.
Councillor.
Yes, thank you for coming along today, and thank you for the amazing work that goes on in Paikakariki, which is where I live. My question is, what support do you get from the Greater Wellington Regional Council, considering that the coastal area below the mean high water springs is their jurisdiction? And also, I hear anecdotally that the Paikakariki Surf Lifesaving Club gets call-ins also from people using their CWB network through Queen Elizabeth Park.
At present, we're not receiving any support from the Greater Wellington Regional Council. It's something that I am working on. We are well supported by Wellington City Council and by Porora as well, who are doing similar work in terms of similar to what's provided here. But we are, I'm trying to make some traction in that space. Just in terms of Pycock, I'm not aware of the additional work that's done with Queen Elizabeth Park, but out of there is also based our call-out squad, and what they do is emergency call-outs on behalf of police if there's anything in the marine environment, and it's another strand of what they're actually doing in there. But I'd like to see how things sort of fall out in terms of government funding going forward, and then definitely we'll be having a look at some of that in terms of additional funding options.
Thank you, Charlie.
Yes, thank you, and certainly I'm very supportive of the fact that we provide funding to this service, because I think it's very important for us socially as well as in safety-wise. And just while I've got the microphone, I'd like to plug the Paikakariki Surf Lifeguards Open Day, 2 p.m. Sunday 13th of September, and you can check out their plans for their new building as well.
Alrighty, Charlie, look, there's no further questions. Appreciate you taking the time to come up to Council today. We're going to move into the body of the report, and we are going to take it as read.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Charlie. And just checking if there's any questions from the elected members regarding the report, starting on page 7 and the recommendations can be found on page 11. So before we move to the recommendations, any questions? The free ambulance, Councillor Buswell's just asking about, not here today. Tanya, do you want to just briefly explain?
So Wellington Free Ambulance couldn't make today, but the report is here. I'll just let you read through that at your leisure. Yeah, but I can definitely let you know their services mentioned Kapiti area, but excludes Te Horo and Otaki, and they've put in their report back that they've helped over 6,529 people. I thought I might get them in at a different time to come and present, because it'd be really worth having hearing from them around the services that they do provide for Kapiti.
Thanks, Tanya. So, Councillor McCann.
Thank you very much. On page 10, under other considerations, I was just wondering, with the review and the DHB, is our council got any opinions, or are we making any recommendations or trying to make any noise about the obviously boundary overlap and issues that occur around Otaki?
That's been an ongoing discussion for our region for a very long time. I understand that elected members themselves on community boards have been having that discussion for a long time as well. In regards to our team's role in that, we are not heavily involved in that side of things. We leave that to particularly our elected members, and we concentrate on the service provision that is provided at operational level. But understand what you're saying and hear you loud and clear around the complexity of boundaries that not only cut across health, but cut across education and justice as well. So hopefully that answers your questions around that.
Thank you.
Councillor Holiday.
Just following up on your comments, Rob, it's certainly an issue, being sort of near my portfolio, that's been talked about, and certainly is a focus of mine, pushing things forward. I also just wanted to highlight one of the big initiatives that the free ambulance has done, and that's the diversion scheme that they've been doing, which has proven very successful, which is actually diverting people out of ambulance service and directly to GPs, and it's already made quite a huge impact on how the service, or I guess allowing resources to be reapplied in other areas, which is great. But that's an initiative that's about 12 months old, Tanya, would that be about right? And it's proving very, very successful. So we're finding the ambulance group up here is very proactive. They're also very open to ongoing conversation as well.
Thanks, Councillor Holiday. While you've still got the mic and I've got no further questions, would you like to move the recommendations on page 11?
I will, but just one other quick thing I just did want to ask. In regards to the fundings that we're talking about here, I'm assuming it's the same amount of funding each year moving forward? It's not a different amount as to last year as such?
No, it's not, but that's part of the work that we're doing to move forward and provide a strategic vision and equity lens over it, and we'll take that to the long-term plan, because it's a long-term plan, I guess, discussion around funding for that.
Look forward to having that conversation with you.
So, sorry, the microphone's just went off there, but we've moved by Councillor Holiday, and I think a signal from Councillor Randall that he'd like to second that. So, right of introduction, otherwise we'll move straight through, waived. So, any further discussion for debate? Councillor McCann?
Really, I'm wondering about the opportunity with publicity. We heard some wonderful stories there, and they were really an indication of how to pull public's heartstrings. No puns intended whatsoever. But I'm just wondering if we could note to staff that maybe our traditional method of communicating that we're supporting them, we could work through story rather than just an article about funding. I don't know.
Thank you. So maybe just note it and we'll take that offline. I'm certainly not brushing that comment aside. We'll note it and then look at what we could potentially do there and maybe work with portfolios as well. So thank you, Councillor. I don't see any other names down on the list, so I'm going to put that to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Again, it's carried. And thanks to Tanya and Karen, your team. All right, so we're now moving on to item 8.2 on page 14 of the report. Just welcoming up Glenn to the to the table. Good morning, Glenn. And just going to hand it over to you in regards to the Transport Agency's audit.
Thank you for the introduction and good morning to you all. The paper in front of us today talks about Waka Kotahi, as NZTA is now known, the procedural audit that was undertaken earlier this year in February. Waka Kotahi typically carries out two types of major audits: an investment audit, which has a technical focus, and that focuses around physical works, and an investment procedural audit, which typically focuses around processes and procedures. There is some overlap between the two audits, but that's broadly speaking how they are undertaken. The investment audit we last had was in 2019, and Council received the overall highest rating for that audit. The audit that this paper focuses on was undertaken in February 2020 and earlier this year, and was an investment procedural audit. Pleasingly for our Council, we got the highest overall rating of effective, and we also had the highest overall rating for the subject areas that were assessed, so it was a good outcome. Certainly want to acknowledge the wide range of staff and teams that are involved in the work that was put into delivering the services that was audited, and happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Glenn. And as the portfolio lead in this area as well, just want to pass on my thanks to Sean, yourself and the team for the work that they do in this area. I think, was this the same report that went to Audit and Risk as well? So it has been before the Audit and Risk Committee as well. Again, it shows the tremendous work that the team put into this area and the generally good results that it receives back through the audits. So well done. I don't see any further questions from councillors. There's no names up on the screen. It certainly doesn't sort of diminish the work that your team does. So if we could have someone that is happy to move the recommendations on page 17, Councillor Holborough, seconded by Councillor Buswell. Any further just right of introduction? Yes, Councillor Holborough.
Yes, I just wanted to congratulate the team on this excellent result, which was also reflected in our earlier resident survey in terms of customer satisfaction with the services that are provided. And I did suggest that this come to this committee as well as Audit and Risk during the Audit and Risk Committee, because I think it's important that this information is put on this more open public record, and that we acknowledge the work that's done in this area and the results of this audit.
Councillor Holiday.
I just want to build on that a little bit as well, and just make note that we've been well briefed in this area and had good discussion in this space as well. So it's not a lack of asking questions or anything like that, but also congratulate the team on the amount of funding that you're able to secure from the NZTA. I don't think perhaps a lot of our community realise that it's a 50-50 split, but it's 50% we have to ask for, and we have to go out there and get, and you do a fantastic job of doing that. And long may it continue. So thank you very much.
I guess lastly from me, the last comment that Councillor Halliday has made is no small sort of comment or feature. The better the team perform and the more trusted they are by the agency, the more likely they are to get the funding that they request, and that is funding that we don't require from the ratepayers. So Sean and Glenn and the team have done exceptionally well over the years to get as much funding as they can legally can get from the agency, because if they do blur the lines around the investment funding, then questions are asked and we're less likely to get that funding. So again, well done to the team. So I'm just going to put that to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, and carried. Okay, so we're moving on to item number 9, which is the confirmation of minutes. That is found on page 28 of the report, and there is minutes from the 30th of February, 16th of July and the 20th of August. Are we happy to take that as a group, or do we want to take those minutes, comment on them individually? I know there is a slight error in one that Councillor Randall would like to raise. So Bernie, I'm happy to go to you first if you want to.
Mr. Chair, the 20th of August, it says Community Board member Marilyn Stevens apology for lateness is accepted, but when you look in attendance, her name is not there. And also, an acquaintance of mine, Mr. Guy Burns, his name, he was at the meeting, he sat next to me, but his name is not mentioned.
So I'm sure we can sort that out now. It's the purpose of having this in the meeting. So noting the attendance of Mr. Burns from the Parapuni Community Board, and also, oh no. Thank you, Marilyn. So that is noted. So with those changes, just checking that you've got that, Tanika, because I can see that you were... Do you want to just repeat that, Marilyn? We've got... Sorry, if you could just use your microphone.
On the 20th of August, I was noted as an apology for lateness, but in fact I was an apology for the whole meeting. And on the 13th of February, I am not mentioned there at all, and I was an apology for that meeting as well.
Sure. All right, team, look, we're just having a little bit of an offline discussion in terms of how community board members are recorded. We'll take that offline. And just noting that we've got Mr. Burns as well there on that 20th. Thank you. So with those comments made, is someone happy to move the recommendations? Again, found... I can't see any other names up on the list in terms of any other questions raised. So the minutes for those three... that's found on page 28. Councillor Buswell, seconded. Councillor Holbrook, any further discussion? No. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against. Carried. I'm moving through quite quickly because I appreciate some councillors need to slip away. We've got no one here that I'm aware of for public speaking, and we've got no publicly excluded minutes to be confirmed. So I now ask that we move into publicly excluded. I'm not going to take a break. We hopefully can push through. And so if someone wants to move that we go into Councillor Compton, seconded by Councillor Buswell. Any further discussion? All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against. Carried. Just a couple of seconds while we wait for Tanika to turn off live